USVI News, your Virgin Islands connection.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for USVI News. I'm Emily Matson. As we begin a new week, positive COVID-19 cases continue to decline significantly across the territory. According to the latest numbers from the Virgin Islands Department of Health, there are currently 41 active cases territory-wide, with 26 on St. Croix, 14 on St. Thomas, and just one active case on St. John. The entire country remains under a state of emergency, which was just extended by President Biden nationwide. And despite declining case counts, VI Governor Albert Bryan Jr. has also just requested the 34th legislature to extend the state of emergency in the territory. Communications Director Richard Moda explains why.
Here locally, we believe the end to the state of emergency is in sight. However, having the state of emergency in place allows us to keep our most effective tools in protecting our community against the spread of COVID. One, it allows us to keep in place and effectively enforce the existing nursing home and hospital visitation regulations. It also allows us to continue to access additional emergency medical personnel to assist our medical professionals here at home. It allows us to keep in place the travel portal, which has been effective in serving as an added layer of protection to guard against community spread. And as was mentioned a little earlier, and speaking of our travel portal, effective today, fully vaccinated travelers are no longer required to submit a negative COVID-19 test to the travel portal. They simply need to upload their proof of vaccine record, whether fully vaccinated here in the United States Virgin Islands or on the United States mainland. Having the state of emergency here in place locally also will keep our National Guardsmen and women, the personnel at our community vaccination centers, and the other emergency medical responders, and fund the overtime costs to keep them on the front line of the effort to protect both you and me.
So as the Virgin Islands and the nation return to a semblance of normalcy after 2 years of the pandemic, many mask mandates do still remain in effect in the Virgin Islands. Weeks ago, the CDC lifted many mask mandates, and COVID cases in the VI continue again to decline. 1 week ago, Governor Bryan announced more relaxed COVID protocols. However, many mask mandates remain in effect. This, despite the CDC recommendations that most Americans no longer need to wear masks. The new CDC guidance recommends masks only in places where high hospitalization rates threaten to overwhelm hospitals. That's not the case in much of the nation. But masks are still required in the territory at public places like salons, grocery stores, and indoor restaurants. Some are frustrated with the rules, but VI Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett says she supports the VI government's decision.
You know, we have one of the lowest vaccination rates in the country. I think that is still problematic in the Virgin Islands, and even more so as the age drops of individuals, and we're not outside of the realm of COVID-19 pandemic, and with our underlying health issues that are much more prevalent in the territory than in other places. I think the governor is appropriate in being cautious in moving forward.
The Virgin Islands is set to receive about $8 million in funding to fight the opioid crisis. VI Attorney General Denise George recently announced the final approval of the $26 billion opioid agreement with the nation's 3 major pharmaceutical distributors. The defendants will start releasing funds to a national administrator in April. State and local governments and territories will begin to receive the money in the second quarter of this year. The territory will receive its share of the nearly $8 million settlement based on its population size and severity of the opioid crisis compared to other states, counties, and territories. According to Attorney General George, quote, under the terms of the settlement agreement, 85% of these funds will go directly to support treatment, recovery, harm reduction, and other strategies to address opioid abuse and addiction. And by the way, this agreement marks the end of 3 years of negotiations and is the second largest multi-state agreement in U.S. history. Now, for the very latest on the war in Ukraine, more than 1.5 million people have fled Ukraine as Russia continues its invasion. It's become harder for civilians to flee as Russian troops are increasing bombings of major cities and getting closer to reaching Kyiv. 4 people, including 2 children, died from that attack you just saw on your screen in the Ukrainian city of Irpin. Just 15 miles from Kyiv, Russian forces shelled the city as they moved closer to the capital. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is calling on other nations to supply Ukraine with fighter jets, something the U.S. and Poland are currently working on. And there was a third round of talks between Russia and Ukrainian delegations Monday. Russian news agencies are reporting that Moscow has agreed to a ceasefire around several cities to allow for humanitarian corridors. It's unclear, though, whether that's actually happening. Meantime, on Capitol Hill, there is growing momentum to ban Russian oil and natural gas imports to further cripple Russia's economy. Meantime, more companies are pulling their goods and services from Russia. On Sunday, several companies announced they would suspend services in Russia, including streaming service Netflix. A Netflix spokesperson saying, given the circumstances on the ground, we have decided to suspend our service in Russia. FedEx earlier had suspended inbound service to Russia, but has now halted all package movements, including domestic deliveries, in both Russia and Belarus. And TikTok announced it is suspending live streaming and new content in Russia, but its in-app messaging service will not be affected. So as the war continues in Ukraine, congressional members say the U.S. should be prepared for cyber attacks from Russia. Our USVI News correspondent, Washington, D.C. correspondent Rachel Knapp reports.
If Russia pursues cyber attacks against our companies, our critical infrastructure, we are prepared to respond. For months, we've been working closely with the private sector to harden our cyber defenses, sharpen our ability to respond to Russian cyber attacks as well.
After rolling out heavy sanctions against Russia after they invaded Ukraine, President Biden says they've seen cyber attacks from Russia on Ukraine, trying to mislead people about the Ukraine situation. And political analysts say Russia's focus could pivot to the U.S.
I think it's very likely that we will incur some cyber attacks in the United States. It's always difficult to know when these are going to come, and it's also difficult to know what our own intelligence agencies have been able to fend off because they don't want to reveal their methods and practices.
Senator Kirsten Gillibrand says although they haven't seen any cyber attacks on the U.S. public or private sector from Russia, we should be prepared.
And those attacks will likely not come in the form of an attack on government, but it'll more likely come in the attack of the private sector.
Gillibrand says hackers have already caused problems in New York before, attacking the Metropolitan Transportation Authority a few months ago. Now she's pushing for additional funding to build our cyber infrastructure.
The sanctions that the U.S. and our allies have levied on Russia following the invasion of Ukraine have increased the risk of retaliatory cyber attacks, particularly against New York State infrastructure and individuals. The United States must act quickly to strengthen our cyber defenses to counter any unwarranted and unprovoked Russian aggression.
And some of those cybersecurity measures the senator mentioned include using a two-factor verification process when logging into your computer and accounts, as well as updating all of your computer systems. Allegra Miles is going to Hollywood. During Sunday's American Idol, Allegra made it past the auditions round of the 20th season of American Idol. 19-year-old Allegra Miles is a singer-songwriter who grew up on St. John. She now lives in Florida as she pursues a successful singing career. She spent 5 years living on St. John. I caught up with her to get her reaction to moving forward in the American Idol singing competition.
Seeing the audition and just doing it was absolutely insane, and especially to get to go to the next round is crazy, and I'm so grateful, and I will never take that or any of this for granted, especially considering, like, you know, along the way you meet so many incredible people, and I've met so many friends who are so close, and I know we're going to be close for probably the rest of our lives, which is really special. And there's so many other people who, you know, deserve, quote unquote, I don't love that word, but deserve, you know, to do this and to have this platform just as much as I do. So, you know, I don't take it for granted. I'm super grateful for sure.
Right. So you got the ticket to the next level. Where do you go now? I guess, what is the next stop for you on the show?
Yeah. So next up in the show is Hollywood Week, which is kind of just a crazy week of 3 different rounds. Yeah, I'm very excited for people to see that too, but definitely it was very stressful but very fun as well.
And Allegra tells me she's beyond grateful for all of the support the Virgin Islands community has given her over the years. So Allegra is going to Hollywood. We can continue to watch her as she competes in this 20th season of American Idol. We, of course, wish her the best of luck. A look at your local forecast is straight ahead here on USVI News. Plus, how much alcohol is too much alcohol? Is one glass a day good for you? A look at a new study on the impacts of drinking when USVI News comes right back. Previous research shows heavy drinking is not good for the brain. Now, a new large study shows even just one drink a day can have an impact. Bradley Blackburn has more on the findings.
Many people enjoy the occasional glass of wine with dinner or a drink to wind down at the end of the day.
Red wine and chocolate is a good combination.
I usually have probably one drink later on in the evening.
Research has long shown that those who drink heavily have changes in the structure and size of the brain that are associated with cognitive impairments. But now a new study finds even just a few beers or glasses of wine a week may also be risky.
Were you surprised by what you found?
I was. I was surprised at just how little alcohol seems to be necessary to reduce brain volume.
Dr. Henry Kranzler and researchers from the University of Pennsylvania looked at data on more than 36,000 adults and found light to moderate drinking was associated with reductions in overall brain volume.
What happens in cases where people drink far more than one drink a day?
The reductions are proportional. So the more you drink, the smaller the volume.
For example, in 50-year-olds, increasing drinking from about half a beer a day to a pint of beer led to changes in the brain equivalent to aging 2 years. Dr. Kranzler says the study's findings are in contrast to current guidelines on safe drinking limits, which say no more than one drink per day for women, no more than 2 drinks per day for men.
It's reasonable to have a small amount of alcohol, but I would discourage people from drinking more than 1 or 2 drinks on any occasion, and no more than probably 7 drinks on average in a week.
Dr. Kranzler says about a third of the adult population drinks more than recommended, so cutting back could have real benefits.
CDC data shows 2 in 3 adult drinkers report drinking above moderate levels at least once a month.